Welcome to this final session in our series of contemplative explorations. We've traveled together through many territories of understanding. We've discovered the backwards law, how trying creates its opposite. We've recognized that you are it, that the deepest you is the whole universe looking at itself. We've explored the wisdom of insecurity, watched the watcher disappear, contemplated death and the cosmic dance. And now perhaps a very reasonable question arises in your mind. So what? What difference does any of this make? What do you do with it? What is the practical application of knowing that you are the universe? How does understanding that life is a dance help you pay your bills, raise your children, navigate your relationships? This is not a foolish question. It's one of the most important questions you can ask. I once put it this way: of what use is the universe? What is the practical application of a million galaxies? Yet just because it has no use, it has a use which may sound like a paradox, but is not. What, for instance, is the use of playing music? If you play to make money, to outdo some other artist, to be a person of culture, or to improve your mind, you are not really playing, for your mind is not on the music. You don't swing. So here we are at the end, and the question is, what now? You've heard all these ideas about interconnection and the eternal present and the dance of life. Very interesting, very philosophical. But tomorrow morning, you still have to get up and go to work. You still have problems to solve, meals to cook, traffic to navigate. And this is precisely the point. Let me share something essential. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. The meaning of life is just to be alive, not to achieve enlightenment, not to transcend the ordinary, not to become a spiritual person with special experiences and profound realizations, just to be alive. There's a common misunderstanding about spiritual insight. People imagine that once you've seen through the illusion of the separate self, once you've recognized your identity with the cosmos, you float around in a perpetual state of bliss, that ordinary life becomes somehow beneath you. Nothing could be further from the truth. Zen does not confuse spirituality with thinking about God while peeling potatoes. Zen spirituality is just to peel the potatoes. Just to peel the potatoes, not to peel potatoes while contemplating the infinite, not to transform the mundane into the sacred through mental gymnastics, just to peel the potatoes fully, completely, with your whole being. You see, the great secret that these teachings point to is not that ordinary life is an illusion you need to escape. It's that ordinary life is itself the miracle. The very thing you've been looking for has been here all along, hidden in plain sight by its own obviousness. As I've often said, This is the real secret of life, to be completely engaged with what you are doing in the here and now. And instead of calling it work, realize it is play. So the practical application is simply this: whatever you're doing, do it. When you eat breakfast, eat breakfast. When you walk to your car, walk to your car. When you're in a meeting, be in the meeting. When you're washing dishes, wash dishes. This sounds almost insultingly simple, but notice how rarely you actually do it. Notice how often your body is doing one thing while your mind is somewhere else, entirely rehearsing tomorrow's conversation, replaying yesterday's mistake, planning, worrying, judging. We are living in a culture entirely hypnotized by the illusion of time, in which the so-called present moment is felt as nothing but an infinitesimal hairline between an all-powerfully causative past and an absorbingly important future. We have no present. Our consciousness is almost completely preoccupied with memory and expectation. We do not realize that there never was, is, nor will be any other experience than present experience. So what is the practical application of all these ideas? To actually have a present, to actually be where you are, to stop treating this moment as a stepping stone to some future moment when you'll finally arrive. Now, someone might object, but surely we need to plan. We need to think about the future. We can't just live like animals with no foresight. Of course, planning is fine. Thinking about the future has its place, but notice the difference between planning as a present activity, which is what it actually is, and living in the future, which is what most people do. When you plan, you're using your imagination now. When you live in the future, you're missing your life. Tomorrow and plans for tomorrow can have no significance at all unless you are in full contact with the reality of the present, since it is in the present and only in the present that you live. There is no other reality than present reality, so that even if one were to live for endless ages, to live for the future would be to miss the point everlastingly. So the practical application is not to add something to your life. It's not a new technique or method or practice that you stack on top of everything else. It's more like a subtraction. Stop. Stop treating life as a problem to be solved. Stop waiting for the future to fulfill you. Stop identifying as someone who needs to be improved, fixed, enlightened. What I am really saying is that you don't need to do anything, because if you see yourself in the correct way, you are all as much extraordinary phenomenon of nature as trees, clouds, the patterns in running water, the flickering of fire, the arrangement of the stars, and the form of a galaxy. You are all just like that, and there is nothing wrong with you at all. Nothing wrong with you at all. Now feel what happens when you really let that in, not as a concept to believe, but as a direct recognition. Right now, in this very moment, there is nothing wrong with you. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a self-improvement project. You are a spontaneous expression of the whole universe, as natural and perfect in your own way as a cloud or a wave or a flickering flame. What does it feel like to rest in that recognition, even for a moment? This is the so what. This is the practical application. Not to become something you are not, but to recognize what you already are. And from that recognition, everything changes not because you've changed anything, but because you're no longer fighting against yourself. Man suffers only because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun. And what is it all for, this whole cosmic drama? The universe expanding and contracting, galaxies wheeling through space, stars being born and dying, life arising and evolving, humans building civilizations and philosophizing about it all? It's for fun. Not fun in the shallow sense of mere entertainment, but fun in the deepest sense, play, dance, self-expression for its own sake. The Hindus call it Lila, the play of the divine. And when you recognize yourself as that play, when you stop fighting the game and start dancing with it, suffering transforms. Not that pain disappears. Pain is part of the dance. But the suffering about suffering, the resistance to what is, the agonized question of, why is this happening to me, that can dissolve. Now, I want to be very clear about something. These ideas are not an escape from life. They're not a way to avoid responsibility or to pretend that nothing matters. Quite the opposite. When you're no longer divided against yourself, when you're no longer wasting energy on internal conflict and perpetual self-improvement, you have more energy for everything, more presence, more compassion, more effectiveness. The person who knows that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with them is not lazy or complacent. They're simply not burdened by the exhausting project of becoming someone else. And from that unburdened place, they can act freely, spontaneously, appropriately to each situation. So what do you do after listening to all these talks? You do whatever you were going to do anyway. You live your life, but perhaps with a little more ease, a little less internal warfare, a few more moments of actually being present rather than mentally elsewhere. And in those moments of presence, you might notice something remarkable, that ordinary life is extraordinary, that washing dishes is a miracle, that breathing is a wonder, that the simple fact of being aware of anything at all is the most astonishing thing in the universe. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. You are that witnessing. Right now, in this moment, you are the universe becoming conscious of itself, not as a metaphor, not as a nice idea, as the simple truth of what is happening. When you get the message, hang up the phone. That's a phrase I use to describe the relationship between insight and ordinary life. The insights are useful, they're like telephone calls from beyond the veil of illusion. But once you've received the message, you don't need to keep holding the phone to your ear. You go and live. The biologist does not sit with eye permanently glued to the microscope. He goes away and works on what he has seen. The musician doesn't study music theory forever. At some point, she plays. And so, with these contemplative insights, they're not meant to be endlessly mulled over, held onto, made into a new identity. They're meant to liberate you back into life, into the very life you were always living, but now without the burden of thinking you should be somewhere else, someone else. So, as we come to the end of these sessions together, I want to leave you with the simplest possible instruction: be here, just be here. Not trying to be here. That's too complicated. Just notice that you already are here and stop pretending otherwise. Notice that you are breathing. Notice that you are aware. Notice that awareness itself has no problem, no lack, no deficiency. Problems exist in the content of awareness, thoughts about past and future, judgments about this and that. But awareness itself, the space in which all this appears, that space is utterly free. And that is what you are, not the thoughts, not the problems, not the person who needs to be fixed. You are the space in which all of that arises and passes, clear and open like the sky, untouched by the clouds that pass through. So go now, live your life, do the dishes, pay the bills, have the conversations, face the challenges. But perhaps now and then, remember this: the meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and you are already alive. You always were. You couldn't not be. The play goes on, and you are playing your part perfectly, even when you think you're doing it wrong. Even your mistakes are part of the dance. Even your confusion is the universe exploring what confusion feels like. Even your suffering is the cosmos suffering not meaninglessly, but as part of a vast play that includes both tragedy and comedy, darkness and light. So what? So nothing and everything. So just this moment, just this breath, just this. Thank you for walking this path with me through these 12 sessions. My deepest wish is that something in these words has served as a reminder not of anything new, but of what you always already knew and always already were. You are it. You always were. Now go and play.